So you talking about some of these denominations having to cut back on the possibly on the church planting side. Like how deeply rooted do you see that as being a value across the board of these places doing church planting? Is that one of the things that is one of the early things that they kind of cut out, or do you think that's for a lot of them one of the last things?
Good question, and it depends on the denomination.
Okay.
For some of them, some denominations have such an infrastructure that has to be supported. Mortgages have to be paid on, the children's homes that they have, or global missions. Global missions tends to be one of the first things that they fund, and so it depends on the denomination. I would say for most, it's not going to be one of the first things that they cut. But again, it's once they're going to end up usually reducing funding for that before they start reducing funding for existing ongoing infrastructure. Because again, you don't have to plant a church, but you have to fund the ministry to orphans and the facility that you built. You got to pay for that. And so sometimes people think of church planting as kind of an extra expenditure. But it's, of course, I don't think it is. And so that's why sometimes it'll get cut. So I wouldn't say it's first thing, but it can be early on. And so I would encourage churches and denominations not to do that, but instead see this is the future, and to instead invest the opportunity now. I actually just wrote an article. It's going to be published in On Mission magazine in the Pastor's Edition in just a few weeks. It's called 10 Reasons Why the Bad Economy Gives Us the Opportunity to Plant More Churches.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll put that on the blog too.
Look forward to reading that. And one last question for you. How have you seen it feels like for the longest time there were kind of two things that churches looked at. They looked at missions, which was overseas, and they saw church planting as this other, and they were kind of more separated. Are you seeing trends now where those paths are converging at all, or do you still feel like for the variety of denominations that those are still two separate ways to think about spending money?
That's a good question, and it's a pretty big debate in a lot of denominations right now, including my own. You say converge, which is a great term, because that's the name that the Baptist General Conference, which is a denomination of churches I'm not a part of, but good people in the a lot in North Central, but now nationally, probably the leading mid-sized church planting denomination in America. They have actually recently merged their global church planting and their North American church planting, and they renamed their denomination Converge.
No way. Yeah. Converge is also the name of the software that Exponential puts together
nice
to use
plug.
for church planners.
I think I endorsed that on the webpage.
I hope so. It helped start Restore Community Church.
There you go. Nice touch.
I got to put my plug in there.
Nice touch. And so there's the Converge is what they've done. And so I've worked with a couple of denominations that have gone through the Foursquare and the BGC. I did some consulting with them. And what I would say is that it's one mission. Now, there are some challenges because there are very big differences. I just came from Taiwan, and the way we plant churches in Taiwan in the urban setting there is very different than the way we plant churches in suburban Indianapolis. And so there's some very big differences, but it's one mission. Some denominations are kind of seeing that, bring that under one focus, one board, one agency. Others are not. My own denomination, that's kind of one of the discussions that people are having right now. And I think we have to be cautious about it because they're very different approaches that are there. And so I like the way the VGC has done it, the Converge has done it, where they basically have this one mission, but they recognize that there are differences between the way that they do it. There's some different organizations underneath that one mission umbrella that's out there. But what I would say is we need to learn some things from church planting around the world because there are 34 Western industrialized democracies in the world, and there's no church planting movement among any of them the way David Garrison, the guy who wrote the book on church planting movements, describes them. And so until, right now, we need to learn from them on church planting more than they need to learn from us.
Who's them? When you say them?
Global church planting movements.
Okay. So, like when you think about how maybe the church is expanding rapidly through parts of Asia and South America, what are some things that you've seen in your research that really practically that we could take away here in our culture from them without changing completely our model, but maybe just their philosophical underroots?
Well, here's what I would say. I'm not so sure we don't need to, you said without changing completely our model. What I would say is I think there's a good model out there, right? I think we can keep planting churches, planting churches here. I think we can use, a large outreach to draw, a good group of people, meet in a high school. All that's great. I love that. But what I would say is that's like the checkout line at Walmart, right? And what we've got is you got one lane open, and that one lane is backed up. Right? We don't have enough money. It's a long line. We don't have enough cashiers to get everybody through. That lane's back up. What we need to do is open up some new lanes. Now, those new lanes need to be different. And so some of those lanes need to be giving people permission to plant churches who are lay people and say, listen, and this is what, caused so much growth in the past in movements. The Baptists and Methodists on the frontier from 1795 to 1810, that was probably the last church planting movement on U.S. soil. Well, that exploded because they gave people permission. Or Pentecostals in the 40s and 50s, or the Calvary Chapel in the Vineyard in the 70s. They basically gave people permission to step into those roles, and they opened up more checkout lanes. We need to open up some more checkout lanes with lay people, with bivocational church planting. We need to train some pastors who are not just trained with their undergrad and their MDiv, but who are also trained to be a plumber, a teacher, a lawyer, and they plant churches. So right now, particularly with the money crunch, right? That one lane at Walmart's backed up, and someone needs to get on there and say, we need more lanes open, and that, I think, is going to be key. And we can learn that from the rest of the world.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate you having us into our home. We'll let you in.
Our home? This is your home?
Yeah.
Our home? Well, mi casa, su casa.
Really?
Not really.
I'll go to Cracker Barrel with you guys.
That sounds like fun. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by.